we wanted to talk about signals. Arbitrage does a lot of videos in different ways about Numerai, but we wanted to start doing some about signals, and I wanted to be part of the first one, but I hope that Jason will do some in addition to this one, and even Mike P and some others. Because I think for signals, yeah, it's quite a lot harder to get started than Numerai because of the question of data. And for many people, they don't have, kind of don't know where to turn with data. And maybe even if they had data, they wouldn't know how to transform it into something that is worth modeling. So Jason created the example script a while back, which uses Yahoo Finance data. No, is it Yahoo Finance? Yeah. And then turns it into a kind of cross-sectional global equity problem where the features are being ranked per era, effectively, per month. And so that sort of turned the data into something that is quite like Numerai's data in some way. And you could quite quickly train a model on that. Unfortunately, yeah, it's not the best data API. So I did want to spend some time talking about different data sets that people have found and are using, and also talk through some of the ones that Joachim shared a while ago, and just see if we can like do better in terms of, you know, when a new user signs up, potentially we can share the links to some good free data. So that's part of what we're going to talk about, data. And then the other thing is kind of the title of this talk is like talking about the targets, but you know, there isn't much more we can say about the target than what's in the docs. We are still neutralizing the target, the normal returns by a lot of different factors to find the uncorrelated signal in uncorrelated alpha in everyone's signal. So maybe we can just start with the data stuff. Does anyone want to talk about good data sets that they found that they're using for signals?
I guess I'll start with, I do think the Yahoo Finance is a good start. That's in the example predictions. I think the biggest effort the whole community can make to make that better for everybody would be to help with the ticker mapping. There's already some, but if—
How do they do that?
What's that?
How do they help with that?
So there's already an existing ticker map hosted in an S3 bucket by Numerai, so you can download that, but you'll notice that some are missing. There may be some that are actually wrong, that are pulling incorrect data. So it's really a manual process, maybe unfortunately, but a couple hours goes a long way, especially if a bunch of people can build on others' efforts. So looking at the past validation tickers and filling in some of those would be pretty helpful. You can go to Yahoo Finance's website and just manually find what the ticker would be.
If I could just make a suggestion, the Bloomberg tickers, mapping it to other data sources is fairly difficult because we don't really know what the corresponding entity is. If we could get something like the Figgy codes or the ISIN codes or QSIP codes, something that's different, that's more standardized than Bloomberg tickers, that might make the mapping process a lot easier. And I don't know if that's easy for you to export out of your system, but that would make our life very, very easy.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So we do have CDOLs, and we mainly use CDOL inside of Numerai, but they do have some licensing restrictions. But I think what the license might, I think it would be bad for us, for example, to provide you a live feed of CDOLs but perhaps if we could make that ticker map have CDOLs historically, it could help just with some of the joining, even if you end up still submitting a Bloomberg ticker. Maybe in your pre-processing step, at least you could have had the CDOLs and the others. Yeah, so I think QSIP as well is like another one you've got to pay for. How commonly used is Figgies? Are Figgies?
I don't use them, but
yeah.
They have an API that allows you to like put in the Figgy code and get something else, I think. I can't remember exactly. I spent some time there, but it seemed like if I had the Figgy codes, it might have been easier to get like a regular NASDAQ ticker ID that I can then use somewhere else. Let me look into that, and if that would be helpful, I'll put a note in a Rocket chat.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, it did seem like, I mean, they were trying to solve this horrible situation that these kind of CDOL mafia created. And they're increasing, I think they increased their prices something like 20% a year or something like that, just for no reason. And you're not even getting the data from them. You're getting it from data vendors, and then you're just paying them a license. So it's super bad and won't last very long. Maybe that's why they're scrounging to increase the prices. But I think the solution of OpenFiggy seemed like a good idea. Okay, but that's good to know that mapping is still kind of like bothering people. I think we can do quite a bit better. So Jason, are you maintaining the ticker mapping? Like if someone wanted to make a change to the ticker map, how would they do that? I don't understand.
There isn't a good way to do it right now. It would be to private message Mike P and try to have him add to it. So we should make a GitHub CSV so anyone can do a pull request for it.
Okay. Is there any specific thing I can tell Mike P for doing that? He'll just.
No, I think we can just whatever is in the S3 bucket right now, we can move over to the GitHub repo and maybe add a little bit of markdown to explain how to add to it.
Okay. Would your situation be helped, Jason, with improving this map if you did have other things like CDOL, or would it not really, because your source data doesn't CDOL either? You're using Yahoo tickers, is that right?
Right. I don't think it would help me too much, but I do think adding in a column with CDOL, with ISIN, maybe even the company name would be helpful, just because there are going to be a lot of different data sources, and who knows what column would be helpful for whichever data source.
Yeah. No, it's a bit scary also, like submitting and you're not quite sure if you've joined on the right ticker. Okay, well, this we can make much better, quite quickly. Mike P can do that, and then we can see, I think we can get some of these things in historically. I'll just double check, especially as long as we're not receiving them live. I think that's a significant difference. Okay, and so that's ticker mapping. What other things on data could we do? I mean, part of me thought about like, what if we just served up a bunch of free data that we got? And so even if it was coming from Yahoo Finance, you could still request it from Numerai's normal API. And then you could have your Numerai compute and all that, any automated systems you have that are reading from our API, you could just keep using. But unfortunately, it just kind of like, yeah, any data we have in our API would be data we should be using in Numerai, in normal Numerai. So signals is really for data that we can't like get in that way. So yeah, so what's So how do we make, I think another thing that someone suggested is if there were like just several more example scripts that used other data sources. So there was just like a really nice example script for using Bloomberg's data. Maybe someone actually out there has Bloomberg, and then there's a really easy way you can start. Or any of the other data sources. I will share my screen. I mean, I thought this was a great list, but I didn't look into it too much, and I wonder what you guys think of this list. So this was from Joaquin. And he's like, this is free, this is free, this is free. Some of them are like Quandl, like some are free. And then this seemed like a good list. But if we could have an example script that uses Quandl and a section of Quandl's free data, first of all, I think Quandl would like it because it's almost like making it easy to get started, and you'll probably want to buy more data later. But all of these guys, a lot of them are quite new. It just used to be, yeah, I would say 5 years ago, you had terrible data APIs for financial data. Everything was like using FTP and other bad ways of transferring the data. But some of these, I think it was something like I think it was Alpha Vantage or World Trading Data, one of those where it was like a really new kind of company that was started in like 2018, and they had like a really nice, clean API that seemed to be really good. So yeah, it would be quite cool if, does anyone want to, out of this list, does anyone want to volunteer to make an example script that will be public? Just like we have, so right now we have two example scripts, Jason's Yahoo Finance one and Suraj's Wall Street Bets one. But it wouldn't be too hard for someone to make one for Quandl. I think it would take like a few hours. And it's not like going to be an edge. I don't think it's like worth hiding that script if you have an example. So anyone here can want to volunteer to make one? Long shot? Anyone who at Numerai?
I think Suraj said he would do it.
Really? For what?
Suraj, you want to pop in here?
I can try for free ones.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, your one was amazing. Which, yeah, I think Quandl is probably a good one because it starts free but then you can get some good stuff there, and I think they're like a well-run company, I think.
Yeah, I would second Quandl, and it's going to be higher quality.
Yeah. Okay, well, that would be huge. And I think we would give you some NMR for that. And then like and then also everyone will obviously, everyone will also know it's you who made it. Hopefully it's not too hard to maintain, but I think Jason, it hasn't been too hard. You haven't had to maintain like the Yahoo one, right? Like you've just left it.
A few fixes, and that's actually, I think you're right. There's not a huge edge to keeping your example notebook private, and it's probably an advantage to share it and get some feedback.
Okay, cool. Edgar, I think it's like actually the SEC website where they have different company filings, 8Ks and things like that. That could be an interesting one for an LP. But yeah, if anyone makes these, we would very much appreciate it. Can we put a bounty on it, on any of them? Michael?
Here a Sharpe request.
Sorry?
Here a Sharpe request.
What? Sorry?
A request on Ira Sharpe.
Erasure Bay.
Oh, yeah, exactly. We could put them all on Erasure Bay.
I'm definitely down for bounties on these. Yeah, I think these example scripts like always help a lot. Like Jason's that he made for Signals originally has been like this huge. I think we'd definitely be happy to pay some more for him.
Yeah. Okay, well, I might make some. How much did you get for 420, Suraj, for your Wall Street Bets one?
I guess maybe 300 out of after fees.
Damn, crazy. Okay, so any example script for these is going to be at least 10 NMR, I think. So for any of these. So if anyone wants to do that, that would be amazing. And you can let Mike P know, and he can throw it in so that every user who downloads our example data will get your example script. So I think that'll be cool. Okay, so I think that talks about data. I mean, does anyone want to talk a bit more about framing up problems in quant finance? It would be cool for Jason to show. Do you want to show your example script? Because I do think it's a nice blueprint for if you don't know about quant, you might think of all kinds of bad ways to model quant data. But I do really like the cross-sectional global equity, like transforming features so they're regular, so that every month looks kind of similar, and then transforming the target to be regular too, or neutralized using numerized targets, because both of those things tend to help a lot. But yeah, Jason, if you have it in front of you, that would be cool.
Yeah, I'm just hiding everything too. Here we go. Hopefully this has everything still saved in the output. So this is the original example notebook, which is also the example script each week. And let's see how to do this on the fly. I mean, you're just reading in data from a package called Y Finance, which hooks up to the Yahoo Finance API. And then you download a bunch of price data. And so this whole problem is only using price data. It does some transformations after you get the price data. So this is what the raw data looks like. You have a ticker and the price for every single day. And this is from 2002 to about 2017, I think. So now that we have all those prices, we have an RSI function, which computes the relative strength index, which you can think of as just a momentum indicator. And then, so you calculate the RSI. So now not only do you have price, but you have the RSI indicator. And then here's where we need to kind of control for stationarity to some degree and turn it into a cross-sectional problem. So we take the quintile per day of whatever this RSI was. So you see this RSI number 18 is relatively low compared to these others. So it's in the 0th quintile. This 170 is higher, so it's in the 4th quintile.
Yeah, this is a great point to pause. I mean, so every data set is kind of different. You could have weird data like Wall Street Bets data or something like that, where you've got to really do a lot of work to turn it into a signal. But a lot of other data isn't like that to get into a feature. So this is very common where you have a ticker and some feature. But I should say a ticker and some data. Like you have ticker here and price. Price isn't a feature, but you could submit it as a signal, but it wouldn't be good, right? So because it doesn't have enough of the right properties. And what Jason's doing here is kind of taking it through a pipeline to become a feature, to go from a data column into a feature. So price into RSI, which is just some function of price, and then into a rank or quintile within that universe. So although there is a lot of weird data out there that might be hard to, a lot of data is actually of this form. If price here was PE ratio or 12-month momentum, you could also take that and transform it into a rank or a quintile, or take that and transform it into some derivative of it, and then transform it into a rank. So this is a very good screen to remember if you're working with this data, because it's not very hard after that point, after you get that idea.
Yeah, exactly. So arbitrage is asking how many days do we lag, and that's kind of up to you as well. Like that, when you create lags, which I guess is the next step. So we had the RSI quintile per day, and then here we loop through and we're taking 5 lag days. So here is this day's RSI, here is yesterday's, the day before that, and in this case, they're kind of similar, which a machine learning model might pick up on, and that could be helpful. If they change a lot, that could be helpful. But however many lag days you want to add, how you want to do the lags is all going to be different types of feature engineering, which could make your model better or worse. There are some libraries out there that will come up with any type of combination of these as well to create more features. You may end up overfitting by doing that, but there are just so many ways to do it.
And just a kind of clue why this kind of helps or works, tends to work. If you do have, let's say you put in a raw data column as your feature, like a data field like price to earnings ratio. There are some times, like say 2009, where all the stocks have very low price to earnings ratios. They're all like around 10 because the market was really, really low down. But there are times like now where the average PE ratio is maybe like 25 or something because the market's much more overpriced. And so what the transformation of ranking does, and it's not rocket science, but if you ranked all the PEs, there's always a lowest one and there's always a highest one. And so you might say, because some people might say, well, how can you use data from 2009 to predict what's happening today? And you can't really. But if you ranked it, there was a highest PE stock in 2009, and there's a highest PE stock today. And maybe even though the highest PE stock back then was 50 and the highest PE stock now is 1,000, they still might share some similar properties. So that's the point of all the ranking.
Right. So that's kind of what I meant to by it controls for non-stationarity. If things are changing over time, this will help smooth that out. There are other techniques too. And the other reason why ranking may help is, and I like asking questions like this to Richard because it can sometimes give us hints, is I like to think that their targets are made in a similar way, where really how they think about the stock market is in rankings per era. And so if we rank our features per era, we're trying to kind of get at a similar problem. You want me to keep going through all this?
Yeah, what does it come to? So these are nice graphs.
Yeah, so this kind of explains the targets. So now that we've done all the feature engineering, we're going to join all of the features onto the targets that you guys provide us.
And this is before you've trained anything. You're going to train on this targets.
Right. So we pull in the signals train val data set, which looks like this, and you have the tickers, the dates, whether it's a train or validation, and then the actual targets that we're going to train against.
Yeah, so we can, I mean, the title of this is we're talking about targets, so we can say some more here. So, I mean, what some people say, it's a black box. Why would I submit my signal? I don't know how you're going to score it. And it's like, no, you can download the target and figure out ahead of time, before you stake it, before you start submitting, how good your signal is on our target. Not only that, what Jason's doing is actually training to be good at our target. So it's not at all like you're throwing darts at, oh, maybe this is going to work. Like you can tell on the validation data, even before you upload anything, that you have something that's working on the targets. Now, you don't really have to use our targets. You could just model raw returns or some other thing. And you still, even if you model something weird, some strange target, like, did this stock go up 50%? Like you could do something like that and make that your target. That might have an edge on our targets, but typically if you train on our targets, you know, you're going to make a model that's focused to do well on those things.
Yeah, I think trying multiple methods is probably the best. And then what's great is you can just submit and see if the target that you kind of invented makes sense. But so this is just kind of exploratory data analysis of the targets themselves, where this is how many tickers we've been provided over time. In general, it's been going up. Maybe what's more important is the distribution, like, of the target values themselves. So it's the same as the main Numerai tournament now with the NOMI distribution, where most of the targets take on this middle 0.5 value, and then so 50% of them do, and then 20% take on 0.25, 20% take on 0.75, and then a smaller amount take on the more extreme target sizes. And that proportion is just equal over time. And so then we're gonna just combine the feature set we made with this target set. And so you can see here were the RSI quintiles, and now you have a related target to train them to. So it's really very similar to the Numerai tournament data set. You're creating this cross-sectional thing. You can just train, test, split on it and run an sklearn classifier on it, basically, or a regressor.
Yeah, I like how many, you know, you have all these different RSIs of different lags. All of them are coming just from price. And so there's always like so many possible features you can make from one data column. You could make this same RSI out of PE if you wanted to, or out of any other data source. It wouldn't have the same meaning, but it would be, you know, there's plenty you can do. And lagging is one thing. Different kinds of lags, different kinds of ranking, different kinds of like differentiation, maybe to make it more stationary. There's so many possibilities.
And this is more of like a cross-sectional auto-regressive problem, but because now we know all of the tickers through time, you can do more classical time series analysis stuff here too. You can use LSTMs, or you can do like ARIMA models. One thing I want to try, JRB and I were talking about this the other day, is just to do a very simple time series on the target values alone over time, because you know what the targets are from ticker to ticker, era to era. To implement that in live, we may need to get the like previous week's targets, which is one thing I want to request. But
yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah. And so now, like I said, it's just a simple machine learning problem. You do the train, test, split on train and validation, which Numerai had provided us. You build a model. Here it's an untuned gradient boosting regressor. And then it's trained. You can check out the feature importances, which I really like to look at. So you can see what the model is kind of grabbing onto in figuring out the targets. And generally with an autoregressive problem like this, you want to see the zeros as being more important than, the fours. I guess what that means is like the most recent data point is more important than a data point a little further away, which just, you're seeing autocorrelation, which maybe you want to see in something like this. And then you can just predict, and we look at our distribution of predictions, which is pretty tightly centered around 0.5. And what that tells us is, first of all, it's just a really hard problem. And so it's a pretty conservative model that's kind of predicting everything's in the middle. But really what we want to get at is the edges anyway. So hopefully, and you can work that into your modeling problem in the first place. But hopefully we're getting these tails more correct than not. And then here's a scoring function to see how we're doing as Numerai would score us over time. This is on the training set, so we're clearly overfit, and the mean correlation of 0.02 is pretty high. We're getting almost 70% of errors positive. And the test set's obviously more important. And as you can see, it's a really hard problem. There's a lot of noise. This mean correlation is much closer to 0. The hit rate of how many positive errors you're getting is closer to 50%, but there's maybe a slightly positive model with even like almost a year of drawdowns here. Then it tends to do a bit better afterwards.
So aim for much better than this. This is not the desired outcome. It's just a good example script.
Right. I think the framework is good. The data could be a little bit better. The feature engineering can be a bit better. And Siraj built a notebook on top of this that does do better feature engineering, and I think it does end up doing better. So it's kind of a proof of concept. Then here's some more, it's just kind of boilerplate code, which is going to be helpful to pull out the most recent Friday dates for every week when you want to submit. And then you just take that model that you trained earlier, you predict on the new most recent Friday's date. We're going to double check that the distribution is similar to how our train and test distributions looked, centered around 0.5. So that looks good. And then just a bit more cleaning up, and you can submit right from the API in the notebook.
Have we submitted this live for many? Is any of your accounts actually exactly this model? Or
I think your guys is, I think integration test is this. I don't know, Mike, is that right?
Yeah, it is that. That's right.
how's it doing?
I haven't checked in a while.
It's like random, maybe.
It's strange how, I don't know, how even high, like it can sometimes have high correlation with the target, even though it's just price data. Like, it's...
Yeah, that was something JRB and I were talking about too yesterday, which was, well, my intuition was that if you can get a lot of volatility in your scores, then you're probably at least getting some quality data, even though your learner might be wrong. And then he said, or you just have a lot of noise, which could also be true. I think the way to check for that would be to submit random predictions and get that distribution, and then compare it to your high quality data volatile model.
Yeah.
Although maybe I just invented the t-test, but doing something like that could tell you whether you're random noise or if you have real data.
Anyone have a data, anyone is here a Numerai Signals user that wouldn't mind sharing what data sources they use? I think JRAI, by the way, it's not like all his models are using Yahoo Finance. I think he does have some good data. Jason, do you want to say anything about what data you tend to use?
Yeah, so I do end up paying for data. My day job is more high quality data. So I have a Bloomberg subscription. I've used interactive brokers. I think I've used Quandl in the past as well, which is why I said it was high quality. Intrinio is another one, which is on Joachim's list. That you do have to pay a little bit for, but probably worthwhile.
Any questions for us or comments?
So Honeycomb asked, does score tend to improve with more tickers submitted or less?
I mean, you definitely have a limit to how well you can do without submitting all the score, all the predictions for the universe, because it's based on correlation. So if you're submitting kind of a lot of blanks, then those will get filled in by like 0.5, and will tend to compress the correlation of the things you do predict on. So it is quite favorable to people submitting on everything, but also you might not be kind of trying to come first. Like if you just have a signal that works on the S&P 500, that's a small set of stocks. But you might say, well, it's a small set, and because I'm not submitting on everything, my overall volatility is lower. It's like very hard for me to go down 0.04. Therefore, I'm going to do MMC times 2 or whatever. So you can maybe like leverage yourself up if you have very few predictions.
I have a question about how you plan to use these signals in the hedge fund, the time duration. The reason I'm asking is that I shared a link to a PDF, which I use in the mid-2000s actually, for rank-based prediction and basically what we're doing in the Numerai tournaments. And when I worked on that in the mid-2000s, what I found out that anything that was less than 4 to 6 week prediction was very difficult to get consistently right. Anything that was like 6 to 13 weeks, you could get almost a 55 to 60% hit rate. And beyond 13 weeks, again, it came down. So the 4 week duration in the regular tournaments makes sense to me. The 1 week targets in the signals, is that how you're structuring trading, or is that at this point a part of your iteration? Are you looking at optimizing that time period to see, I mean, maybe 2 weeks or 4 weeks is better? Is that something you're actively exploring?
No, it's very interesting. I think that my understanding is like you can get better and better and better at predicting the shorter time horizon you go. And you're saying it's more like there's a nice middle ground of like a month or 6 weeks. What we find is you can tend to get much higher correlations. Well, it's always complicated. So I mean, you can get high information coefficients, but then they tend to be high churn. So you end up paying much higher trading costs. But but yeah, I would say we do quite like the 1 week target. We don't think it's like, we think it is like sensible, and the example scripts we've made do work quite well on that horizon. But yeah, I think it's a good point. I mean, it's possible, for example, that the Wall Street bets data, it's kind of doesn't make sense at all for some alternative data to look at it on a 1 week horizon, because it might be failing 10 weeks in a row and then work super well in the last week or things like that. So I don't think it's perfect, but I also didn't want to complicate it and have like anything like, well, users can select their time horizon or something, because then it's so hard to compare and it's hard to know whether a user is beating someone. But I'll definitely take a look at that PDF. I think that looks pretty cool. People should read that. It's in the chat of Zoom. We'll put on Rocket Chat too.
Have you guys ever tried the Numerai tournament dataset? Since you know what the tickers are, have you tried that on Signals to see if it has any?
Yeah, we have. Michael, is it even in the website? Michael's sometimes been making some that puts in the website.
What was the question?
Whether you've used the Numerai tournament data itself, so even though it's structured for a monthly prediction, if you've just tried to fit it on the Signals target.
Yeah, actually, the ones that are on like my personal accounts, like Master Key and Apprentice Key, use some variations of the tournament data. They might even be predicting on like 4 weeks time horizons, like the tournament is. But yeah, like we'll have to catalog those at some point and actually say what they are, maybe.
Any insights you've gained from it?
Yeah, I mean they work. I mean, they tend to do about the same as like the feature neutral correlation would indicate, which is basically what the target, the signal scoring is. So it seems to match up.
Right. The way I thought about it was you're creating the targets by using the similar data, the factors from the Numerai tournament, you rank returns and you neutralize basically based on those factors. Is that a good way to think about it?
Yeah, I think that sounds right.
I'm looking at it. It looks like, yeah, not that good. This 1.9% isn't great. And I think this is from our data. And obviously the point of it is that it should be hard to use our data to make good signals models, because signals is neutral to our data. So I like to see that, I don't know, like if this is from our data, how compressed this volatility is super low. It's like lower than your one. So it's sort of like, seems like it's not finding that much.
Yeah, I think that kind of confirms what I was guessing earlier, where if you do have real data that could provide signal, you'll have a bit more volatility. We'll see.
Yeah.
Okay. There are a bunch of questions in Slido. So the first, that we need lower barriers to entry. If you consider de-obfuscating the target and just being a bit more transparent, how about creating another verifiable target like ranked return?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think anyone who, hopefully they're not discouraged, but anyone who gets to the point of uploading to validation will see, oh, okay, I have some information. I thought I had some information coefficient, and I do. I have some correlation with this target. And then also, then you can do what you just showed, which is you can train on our target. You can assess it locally. You can check, yeah, this target isn't very correlated with value or momentum, or you can check all the things we've kind of said about it. So yeah, I think it's not, I don't think I think if we change the whole tournament to be like, yeah, based on raw returns, it would actually be much worse and it would, because people know that so much of what's in raw returns is the fluctuation of factors. And that's just not really the important thing to solve. The important thing to solve is to get an edge over and above factors.
I like the question about creating another target. This was another thing JRB and I talked about, which was multitask training. And so maybe you don't have to give us another target, but because we can create our own labels, you can have a model. You kind of have to use deep learning to do this, but you can have a model predict your target and our own engineered targets at the same time. And that may add some stability to your predictions over time. And I like that idea. I haven't tried it yet, but I think I will.
Yeah, I think that's cool. Yeah, I mean, it's possible you might learn like super weird, strange, depending on your data, obviously, you might learn super weird, strange things if you just look at our target. But if you maybe joint optimize it to be good at normal returns and our targets, that would help.
Yeah. The next question, which I agree with, is when more validation data. Signals is still second-class citizen compared to Classic in this respect. Last update was in February, and I didn't write this, but I could have.
Yeah, well, there's so much that Michael's working on with the data API where I think we'll have it be that Numerai and Signals automatically always have updated validation data. But it'll have to happen, not right away. But I'm not sure what Michael's thinking.
So yeah, I think Liam is actually working on the Signals validation stuff. The Signals should come first, actually, in this case. It should be like, yeah, Liam, what's the status on the Signals validation being updated?
Happening soon.
Soon.
So is it just going to be a one-off, like, here's some new data, it's in an S3 bucket, or what?
We'll keep on updating.
It'll be properly updated.
Yep.
And it'll happen every week.
So every week when the round opens, and there's like a zip file to download, it'll contain up to like within the last 2 weeks of all the signals, like tickers and historical targets. So that'll just always be updating. You'll always have the most recent.
Will that happen to Numerai too?
It will happen, but not as soon as it will happen for signals.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be great, especially to do the time series type stuff.
Yeah.
Why do you want that so much?
To do the time series. Well, also, I think retraining models is like almost an imperative just to control for drift. And I think it's important, and everybody should be retraining their models with new data and everything.
You could do meta learning where your model learns from its mistakes in the past.
Interesting.
That's something you'd be interested in, right?
Yeah.
Arbitrage disagrees here, which I know, but
yeah, well, I'm always skeptical of, I would like something, people might be on Numerai, like training a model that's only on the last 9 months of data and ignoring all the other data because they like want to be really good at the current regime. And I think that's like super dumb. Because you're throwing out a lot of data in the past that clearly is relevant to the present. Because this data is stationary.
On the retraining, it really is that every retraining, you are repeating your hypothesis test. And when you repeat your hypothesis test, your p-values are divided, 1 divided by n, where n is the number of repeat trials. So those of you who are retraining are p-hacking, and you are overfitting.
Depends how you do it, I guess.
Well, if you were doing
I think
on a window basis, then it wouldn't be. So if you were receiving new data every week, and if you're just shifting your window, then retraining makes sense. But if you're just retraining on the same data over and over again, then I agree. Then you're just basically memorizing the data.
Right. It has to be done properly. We can probably have a whole session on this, which one day we will.
I cannot advocate p hacking. I'm an anti-p hacker, for the record.
It's tough to come at quant finance with an academic approach, because then you just shouldn't do quant finance. But,
I don't agree, but that's okay.
Because you'll just be like efficient markets.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So next Slido question. Could you demonstrate how to align a feature column with the proper number of days lag to structure the prediction column correctly? I hope that the example notebook shows that. And really, you just have to join on the Friday date provided by the Numerai targets. And you need to have the same date in your feature set, and then you can just merge on the two. I think the example script does show how to do that, I hope.
Well, if it's a 8 trading day prediction window, then aligning Fridays makes no sense, because then everything optimally would be shifted by 8 trading days. That's what I mean. Because if it's an arbitrary window per period, then it's an arbitrary test per period. So I know that you said with the feature engineering that it doesn't matter, the shifting can be whatever it is, but if the question that you're asking is what is the return in 8 trading days, then anything other than an 8 trading day window is outside of the test, and you're not optimally training on that window. That's why the specificity, I think, is very important for that. And for the record, I don't know what that trading window is. That's why I'm asking. Because is it Friday to Friday? Is it Friday to the following Wednesday? That'd be like, what, 8 trading days? 7 trading days? That's the ultimate question.
I think I see. I have to think about like the optimal lag, but the way I think about the labels themselves is I had to write it down, because it is like really difficult. Once you have it in code, it's helpful because you don't have to think about it anymore. But I think the labels are, you're predicting returns, neutralized returns from Tuesday close price to the Monday close price using data from the previous Friday. And so saying it like that may not be all that helpful. I'd like recommend writing it out. But Tuesday close price to Monday close price, I think, I don't know, Mike, is that right?
However, that can be documented or scripted or something such that it's very clear, I think would be extremely helpful.
I'm sorry, I was doing other things.
Yeah, I keep catching you. Sorry.
Caught multitasking.
Yeah.
It's like my favorite thing to do in daily scores. It's like, oh, boom, got him.
I get the question is, how would you describe in the simplest terms the labels and like what days you should think about it?
Okay, yeah. No, my advice is pretty much to use the labels as I don't know why you really need to know what they even are. Like this is what you get paid on. These are like the return values. You can think of them that way, based on predicting over a weekend given Friday data. So just whatever data you have, you try to build models that can predict that arbitrary target sort of. There is some documentation that has like the calendars of which days it's actually predicting, what the scores come from. But yeah, I don't think I'm gonna like I have to like go look at that calendar every time as well to figure out what's going on there. So I think it's easier to just take the targets as they are.
I study this stuff and I can't figure out what the heck's going on. So I'm just thinking if I'm having a tough time figuring out what's going on, I'm sure everybody else is too. Or I'm just suffering from number dyslexia, but still a more clear example would help. So
What's the question here?
Yeah, so we're talking about Fridays. We're predicting Friday's close to some number of trading days in the future that we resolve on. So I want that to be exact, because I'm going to train exactly on that only, because that's the optimal trading window and training window to use.
It is 1 week minus 2 days lag.
So Is that 5 trading days, 7 trading days? Like, what is the actual number of trading days?
5, but it's ignoring the first 2.
So it's always 5. I just shifted 5 days and now I have it aligned. Boom. 5 trading days.
Yeah.
True or false?
I mean,
It's confusing. I know you ignore it, but we're still predicting.
Yeah, no. I think you should
weekly return.
Predict. We try to. I'll look at. I mean, I don't know why.
Like, what? I don't care that you're ignoring days, because if it's a 1 week prediction window, then I'm going to delete everything in between because it doesn't matter, right? Anything else is just noise. I'm only going to look at Friday to Friday because everything else is irrelevant. I'm going to build all of my windows based on that, right?
I'm pretty sure it's like from Friday data, you need to predict returns for the following Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Monday.
Yes.
So I guess it's technically 4 trading days, but using data from Friday, which is where that maybe confusing lag comes in. But I don't think that should have too much of an effect.
Anything that's not perfectly aligned is a different empirical question. It has to be exact. That's why I'm harping on it. Now, I'm coming from an academic background, so maybe I need to throw out my priors, but I can't do that yet.
No, I mean, I think you're onto something, because like the next slide is kind of a similar question. Can you guide on what the target variable represents? What's the basis of ranking? Here, Richard's showing the calendar. Right, so it's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Monday trading days.
Yeah, so we are using returns. So these returns are not included. So it's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Monday. So it's 4 days. So what's one thing that's also a little bit confusing here is also that the fact that, there are a lot of markets that are open at weird times, that are like open in the, between 2 different days. They're open over midnight, so it's hard to get, like, you don't have to I would not worry too much about it, but if you can be good at predicting 1 week, you'll be fine. And if you take these days out, if you really want to take these days out when you're thinking about making your own target or something like that, then you've got to be good at these 4 days. Cool. Anything else?
There were a few more Slido questions. I think 2 more, which we might be able to finish before time. And we've kind of already touched on some of them. What's the minimum number of tickers we should predict for a meaningful signal submission? Can a weekly submission for only 10 tickers still be valid?
I think we did make it it used to be like 100. I think we did make it a bit smaller because we don't want to like have it throw errors for people. But I can't even remember exactly. Michael, do you know, or Hanson? Are you guys in this meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to look at Anson's question in chat. We're all sorry.
Should we look at this question in chat? Rather than chat, speak, so that it's not like we all have to read the chat.
He's got to set up his mic. He asked if it's valid to try to predict 4 weeks and submitting that against this 1 week target.
Sure, it's all valid. You can do that. You might not have as high correlation with the target as you would have if you predicted on the right number of days.
Cool.
Yeah. My advice, which I take with a grain of salt, like what do I know, is just try everything, because it is a black box target. You don't know what is going to work. If you find something that works,
You dirty P hacker.
Yeah, and regularize, so you make sure you don't overfit.
arbitrage, are you getting what the lag means?
I'm going to have to reread the docs here. Something's not clicking. You're predicting a 1 week return. True or false?
Yes, but it's not cumulative from, it's ignoring the first 2 days of returns. It's only cumulative after the first 2 days.
It's an endpoint. So
No,
if I take the return.
Right, but you have to accumulate it over a certain amount of time.
That's the disconnect.
Yes.
There it is.
So it's ignoring the first 2 days is what the lag
So
means.
you are accumulating the return over a window. That's not common. That's all. So that's where the disconnect is.
I mean,
so you still need to have a rolling return at a minimum number of windows.
If it's a return has to be relative to some point in time.
Well, exactly. You open on Friday and you close the following Friday as a 1 week return.
But
T0 and T5. What's the difference? That's your return.
Right, but it's not relative. If you ignore the first 2 days, it's not relative to the opening. It's relative to 2 days later.
Yeah, I'm just going to have to read the docs again.
The reason for the lag of the 2 days is just because you might know something about what happens. Like you could watch Asia open. You could be up in the middle of the night watching Asia open. And then you could be like, I guess the Dow's going to open up 2% if Asia's going to open up 3%. And you basically can have this look ahead bias. But by taking off 2 whole days, you can't do that kind of thing. So that's the reason we have it. And the other reason is execution. It gives us time to execute, to trade your models, so that we care about the alpha that happens after the first 2 days. And that's why we pay on that alpha that happens after the first 2 days.
Okay, so you guys asked me to look up what the minimum ticker was. I looked it up in the code, it's 10. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So it's 10, and then what we talked about earlier was you probably want to submit as many as possible, as long as you think you have good signal for as many as possible. If you only have signal for a small amount, that will still work.
Exactly. You can't really do that well with 10, but it's just we didn't want to keep throwing errors for people who are like just experimenting and stuff.
Do we have enough time to do maybe 2 more questions or?
Okay.
Yeah. So I like this question. Must we create a complicated predictive model, or can we simply submit a feature column by itself? For instance, the rank of returns of 3-week momentum alone.
Yeah, you could do that, and you would see that it wouldn't be great, but you could.
Yeah, my intuition is that if you can fit a learner on that 3-week momentum alone to the black box targets, you'll see a bit more signal. To arbitrage's point, maybe you'll just overfit there, so you have to control for that. But I think if you have quality data, then just ranking could be interesting. And then the last question, which maybe you guys on the team know, what's the average feature neutral mean correlation and Sharpe ratio on the validation splits? And maybe that's tough to answer because people are submitting a different number of signals over a different number of time for validation. But,
yeah, people can cheat validation, right? They can just upload an overfit signal. But there are some very good ones that seem to also be working on live. And I would definitely encourage, if you're a bit confused after this conversation, I would encourage you to upload even just the example script and watch the validation compute and give you the metrics, and then try to make a better one than that. Because the point also is that versus a back test, I believe that the validation metrics are giving you pretty serious insight into whether this model will generalize. If I look at a back test, you can have a back test over a 2-year period that is just long momentum or long growth, and it has a Sharpe of 2, and you think you're a genius, and you have one feature that's in charge of that. But to do well on signals, validation, and in live, you have to do well in excess of all the factor movements. And that's much harder to do. But if you can do it, it's a really good sign that you have something that will generalize.
Okay, so that's all the questions in Slido. And maybe I've just been thinking about it to have the final word on what these labels represent and what our task is. How I think about it is using data up until Friday's close. You're tasked with predicting the relative returns from the next Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, up until Monday's close, and the returns over those 4 days.
The sum of those, yeah.
Right, the cumulative return over that time, neutralized to some data. That's how I think about it. So I don't know if anybody else has any questions. Obviously, feel free to jump in, or if you want to just have the final word, Richard.
Yeah, well, I'm glad we did this. I think we have a good plan. Like we can't, there's some things we do inside of Numerai that has to just involve us, right? Like we have to add new data to Numerai. Our users can't help us with that. But I think you guys can all help us grow Signals. And I think it's going to really be a very important thing this year for us to try to 10x Signals. That's our internal goal. And get it to like $1 million staked and get it to, 1,000 or more models. And I think we have a good short plan for doing that. So Raj making a Quandle example script would be awesome and would definitely send you some NMR. Anyone else making any example script from any data source that's nice and explanatory and works would also be bounty worthy. And then we will try to improve the ticker mapping. I think that I didn't realize how much that was bugging people. And we can make it into a GitHub CSV so people can make alterations to it. And we can also see about adding new things like CDOL and ISIN and things, maybe historically, but not live. So thanks for everyone for coming, and I hope we can do more of these. Ideally, maybe, yeah, even some of these videos can go to the forum or the docs where new users can go through it to get started, because I think that walkthrough of your example script is like huge for someone who's never done quant finance before, and even they might be a really, really good Numerai user, but they're too scared to like try Signals, but that's bad. We need every Numerai user on Signals eventually.
Yeah, we should definitely keep doing this. And JRB and I are doing some more like casual Clubhouse things, I think, every week. I definitely want to do more video tutorials, which should be helpful.
Great. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.